So, beautiful South Africans, good morning and welcome to a happy Friday. It's difficult circumstances, but it's certainly circumstances which we as South Africa will rise above. So, my name is SUBASH DEVKARAN, and I am your program director for today. We've got a very exciting lineup. We're talking about the GAS, which is the General Aviation Safety Strategy. And we have a number of speakers with us, including our Director of Civil Aviation, Ms. Poppy Khoza, who will be providing a keynote address to ourselves. And we've got the Executive, Mr. Simon Sekwabe, Executive of Aviation Safety Operations. So we expect this to be quite an eventful day in terms of collaborating with all of you participants and all of the industry involved in aviation safety in the country to work together with CAA and improve what is the general aviation safety in the country. So without further ado, I'd now love to hand over to our Director of Civil Aviation. She needs no introduction, Ms. Poppy Khoza. Ms. Khoza, are you ready for us?
It's the new normal, so it takes a bit of getting used to. So yes, I was actually muted. Apologies for that, Program Director. Firstly, let me begin by extending very warm greetings to yourself, Program Director, Mr. SUBASH DEVKARAN, the executives from the South African Civil Aviation Authority, the Aviation Safety Operations team under the leadership of the executive, Mr. Simon Sekwabe. The various panel members will be instrumental in today's discussion, to distinguished stakeholders and colleagues who are following this launch from their various places of work and remotely. And lastly, and by no means least, to aviators and aviation enthusiasts from across our country, the continent, and those who would be watching all over the world. Again, warm greetings to you all. There may be little or no contest if I were to make the assertion that aircraft accident and serious incident statistics are used as a basic barometer to determine whether a country's airspace is safe or not. This approach is recognized by many countries, by many civil aviation authorities and organizations across the world. It also confirms the presence and effectiveness or lack thereof of the administration of civil aviation safety and security oversight in a particular country. Practically, a high number of accidents and fatalities would simply raise eyebrows and send a strong indication that adequate oversight lacks. Having said that, Program Director, I am delighted to indicate that South Africa holds a remarkable record in terms of safety, and one can break it down into various categories. In the global front, ICAO measures the rate of accidents in the airline or scheduled operation sector, and within states, authorities such as ours would look at a total picture of accidents from both scheduled and non-scheduled. It has been over 30 years since a South African airline was involved in an accident that led to a fatal injury of passengers and crew members. The last of such an accident was the well-documented Helderberg, which happened on 28 November 1987, some 134 nautical miles or 248 kilometers northeast of Mauritius. This means that it has been nearly 400 So ladies, at this juncture, one cannot really say the same as we witness aircraft accidents from time to time. So what is seemingly second nature in the airline industry is yet to translate to general aviation activities. But having said that, and to put things into context, one can see that over the 3-year period, we have seen an increase in accidents in general aviation, but we've also seen a decrease in fatal accidents as well as fatalities. So the launch of this GA or General Aviation Safety Strategy is indeed timely, as we together recognize that the status quo cannot remain and that we must act swiftly to reduce accidents in the general aviation sector. While we understand that not all countries keep a record of or investigates the causes of accidents involving small and light aircraft, we in South Africa, we've chosen to do the opposite. This means that we keep a record and also investigate the cause or causes of all accidents as well as serious incidents. One may ask a question, why is South Africa concerned about other categories of aviation activities that some parts of the world have chosen to ignore? There's two simple but key answers to this question. One, we understand that in aviation, risks are easily transferable. What I mean is that it is natural for aviators active in general aviation to eventually migrate towards commercial scheduled operations. So in some instances, the same pilots who fly for airlines are involved in general aviation or private flying activities. It is therefore logical that any form of wrong principle and habits applied in private flying would likely resurface in commercial and or scheduled operations. And if that is the case, then disaster will soon befall us. The second aspect and most important reason is simply the fact that as a regulator, beg your pardon, as a regulator, we firmly believe that one life lost is just one too many. There is also an understanding that any failure to address safety concerns will leave the CAA as the regulator with no choice but to step up or step in and take the necessary steps to ensure that all safety concerns are addressed adequately. Program Director, in recent years, we've witnessed an increase in the number of self-grounding decisions by airlines and charter operations, meaning that the principles of self-regulation and voluntary compliance is to a degree becoming entrenched in this sector. We applaud this emerging culture and would strongly encourage the same in the general aviation sector. Sadly, the catch me if you can mentality of some operators undermine efforts of many who want to comply to the rule of law. It is in this vein, Program Director, that I take this opportunity to recognize and applaud all operators and aviation professionals who will not undermine good safety practices by prioritizing commercial interests ahead of prescribed safety measures. Having said that, I remain a perpetual optimist, and hence I am excited and in total support of this initiative which we are launching here today, called the General Aviation Safety Strategy. What is more exciting is that not only did the Civil Aviation Authority as a regulator ensure that there are dedicated resources to see this strategy through, but most importantly, the regulator solicited and worked with the industry to get to this far. It is through a genuine desire to work together that we would start seeing a difference. So what is it that we ultimately want to achieve? Perhaps this is the right time and platform to indicate that the Civil Aviation Authority has consciously put emphasis on the reduction of accidents in the general aviation sector as one of its outcomes in the organization's new five-year strategy. This is key in the sense that reducing the number of general aviation accidents is a national, regional, and international imperative with due consideration of the sovereignty of other ICAO contracting states, as South African aircraft operate in and has proven can become involved in accidents in other regions and sometimes with high fatalities per accident. We are not, therefore, by any chance claiming that this strategy will become a panacea for curing all ills surrounding general aviation activities. It simply represents a major opportunity for collaboration towards reducing general aviation accidents. The possible solutions outlined in the strategy are the result of prior consultations and much deliberations, as I've indicated, and it promotes cross-functionality and coordination between the CAA and various external stakeholders. I will resist at this point the urge to unpack the details of the strategy. I will leave that to the executive responsible, Mr. Schwabe, and his team, Mr. DeLange, and other various experts. What I do wish to point out, though, is the fact that there was consensus from broad-based consultations and interactions with various stakeholders. The outcome of the consultation process pointed to the need for enhanced education as well as training. This outcome did not surprise me because an analysis of the causal factors as determined by the Accident and Incident Investigation Division, coupled with the collection and analysis of incident reports, clearly point to the fact that flight crew and aircraft operations remain the leading causes of accidents and serious incidents. Program Director, as I conclude, I wish to conclude by emphasizing that numbers don't lie and statistics are pointing to a problem. What is left of us is to fold up our sleeves and get to work collectively in order to give credence to the CAA's brand promise of keeping you safe in the sky. It is doable and it is entirely up to us. In fact, we have all the means to make this work. As an additional safety measure, the CAA has in the most recent past started a process of bolstered data collection and analysis by calculating the rate of accidents against the numbers of hours flown and air traffic movements. Accident reduction, or accident prevention rather, should be engraved into MN's DNA. I am indeed thankful that the new normal that has been imposed on us by COVID-19 has signaled to us that there are many other ways to skin the cat. Through technology, we are now able to gather or convene in large numbers to discuss common topics. In the past, we had to be content with a few hundred people convening in a conference facility. So what I'm trying to say is, let us use this inconvenience imposed by COVID-19 to think creatively, to recognize and embrace the opportunities that were presented to us by this crisis. From the regulator side, our renewed approach is to collaborate, cooperate, and communicate more with the industry for the betterment of this fragile sector of our economy. This is, of course, a journey we are prepared to traverse with you, because without a strong regulator will be a dysfunctional industry, and without a vibrant industry will be an irrelevant and ineffective regulator. So this is a good opportunity for us to go back to basics, to share experiences and solutions which can only boost our efforts and bring us closer to a fatality-free general aviation environment. This is doable, and yes, we can do it. I therefore call on each of us to enlist our contribution and pledge to working together to put an end to aircraft accidents. It is a journey, and I believe that we are taking the right step. Statistics, as I've indicated, they don't lie, and they reveal that through our careless decisions, we are adding to the number of orphans, and we are losing breadwinners, and I believe that we can change this picture, for it all lies in our hands to create an environment which we will be proud of, an environment which will remain a legacy for the generations to come. Every flight and every training flight must end in a safe landing, where the young ones can relate to their experiences, to their parents and peers. Let us use the General Aviation Safety Strategy to chart the way forward towards making our skies safer. Program Director, I thank you for this opportunity, and I want to wish you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, DCA. And you're such a perpetual optimist. Yes, certainly. I think in all of our experiences together, that's what we've certainly seen. And also, we must thank you for your time, but not just your time this morning to join us, but also your continuous and preemptive efforts towards GA safety. You mentioned that it's been more than 30 years since a major accident on the commercial side with an airliner And we certainly hope this record is going to remain, DCA. And what I also do appreciate is this pledge which you've made to work together both with the industry, foster a greater relationship, and keep the industry, keep the regulator on the right track. And we're certainly looking forward to what's still to come. Thank you very much, DCA. So, beautiful South Africans, a great start to the morning. And next up, we have Mr. Simon Sechwabe, who is our executive of the ASO department, a huge department at the CAA. And he's also got a speech. He's been talking to us more about the General Aviation Safety Strategy. Mr. Sechwabe, are you ready to fire away?
Program Director, I am ready.
Please go ahead, sir. Good to have you.
Thank you, Program Director. Let me begin by acknowledging the presence, online presence of our CEO, the Director of Civil Aviation, Ms. Poppy Koza. The same goes to Mr. Neil de Lange, Mr. Johan LOTTERING, Mr. Pierre Lopsha, Mr. FREDY TONG, Mr. CLAUDE LUTHAGA. Good morning to you all, as everyone that has logged in and is following this webinar. We truly appreciate your presence, ladies and gentlemen. The director alluded to the fact that the broader consultation has already taken place when this strategy was developed. That was key as we regard this as not just a CA-only initiative, but a broader collaborative process that requires an all-hands-on-deck approach if it were to truly be successful. Allow me to just focus on silent point of the General Aviation Safety Strategy, the GAS. We reflected on past challenges and successes. What I mean, a post-mortem was performed on both the GASI, which was a General Aviation Safety Initiative, together with the Cross-Functional Accident Reduction Plan, the CFAP, which are past safety initiatives. Most importantly, the success of this past initiative and other safety-related campaigns and other efforts were lifted and incorporated into the process of developing the GAS, making it what it is today, a comprehensive and multi-stakeholder safety project. It is about time we draw a lesson on what works in an airline environment. The team interrogated and I personally reflected on factors that makes airline operations safer than general aviation operation. It all boils down to a very high level of oversight and control as aspect of operation. There is a process dedicated to monitoring flight profiles, and the key factor is that corrective feedback is provided for an exceedance known as Aviation Integrated Monitoring System, the AIMS. There also is entrenched culture of meticulous pre-flight planning. This is coupled with availability of NOTAM, or Notice to Airmen for those who prefer English instead of common aviation terminology, as well as meteorological data, including satellite photographic images. There are also extensive initial type training program. This is supported by a high level of technical training and testing. You guess it's right. There is also multi-crew resource management, in short, CRMA. Airline also rely and carry out multi-crew operation. There is meticulous flight crew selection procedure and psychological profiling. This is supported by also intensive medical examination on regular basis. I mean, you guess some pilots or some people are more healthy than the others. There is a recurrent training program, including both technical and flight handling skills. The above is supported by the use of highly experienced instructors. Modern technical and flight training facilities exist, some of that most small operators cannot afford. There is ongoing maintenance of discipline by both the airlines and professional standard committee within the various pilot associations. Active peer review, flight standard checking plays a critical role in this sector. Most oil airlines also give care groups or programs created within their structures to deal with personal problems experienced by flight crew. Now, above this place, what are the chances that system could fail? I'm now going to try and list some of the main groups of deficiencies that have been identified in the general aviation sector. Contemporary accident reports, statistics show pilot remains the weakest link in accident causation chain and should be the focus area. Truth be told, it is also evident that standard of primary instructor leave much to be desired. The system of inexperienced pilot acting as ab initio trainer directly indirectly resulting in fatal training accident. Recommendation from accident and incident report. Trends are seldom converted into accident prevention strategy or incorporated in the training curriculum. Major causal and contributing factors of accident are rooted and desensitized society, widespread disregard of value of life or well-being and safety of fellow citizens, general resentment of authority, culture of lawlessness, appetite for risk, ingrained misconception and weakness in the training. I know this is mouthful, right? But it is what the research points to. Existing accident reduction technique using heuristic to reduce probability of accident are believed to be ineffectual, thereby adding to cognitive workload of pilot, and ultimately that tends to overwhelm them. Criminological origins and development of accident have never been explored nor understood. Pursuant to the principle that aircraft accident and incident investigation are not meant to be apportioned blame, but to prevent accident could possibly hamper the effort to reduce accident through prosecution and punitive action. Let us say a handful of people may take unnecessary risk, knowing very well that should they walk away from the wreckage, there will be no punitive measures taken against them. Training curriculum do not demonstrate how accidents develop, what the accident precipitate circumstance might be, and how causal factors contributing to accident are identified, managed, and eliminated. Flight training theory and practical training are aimed at career goals, while accident causal and contributing factor and circumstances conducive to accident are negated and not addressed at all. Pilots are not equipped to deal with factors external to the cockpit that overwhelm them. These include but are not limited to undue pressure on pilots, negative group dynamics, unrealistic expectation, and misconception. Pilots need guidance, mentorship program to recognize and avoid potential error in judgment and to improve decision-making skill. With that said, allow me to conclude my remarks by pointing out that this strategy aims, among others, to provide participants with dedicated publication and social media platform to share ideas and knowledge. We must be cognizant of the fact that threat of remotely piloted aircraft, ARPAs, continue to escalate. Should solution not be found to avoid catastrophic event, especially from general aviation perspective, ARPAs are often operated in confluence of airways, near busy centers, and in controlled airspace. The same applies to the use of laser. In addition, support to both medical profession as well as pilot must be enhanced to develop a system to ensure the integrity of the medical assessment on one hand, and to provide mechanism to pilot to deal with stress related to demand of cockpit environment on the other. Let's consider what I have just mentioned as part of the opportunities and threats that were identified during the drafting of this strategy. The team really done a great job and looked at international best practice, which will have not been ignored. We cannot afford to reinvent the wheel, as there are no new cases of accident. It is just a matter of the same cause by different people on a different day. Having said that, I know that the majority of us remain hopeful, and the threat of general aviation as a perfect collaboration and life-changing initiative that will usher life-saving, everlasting positive changes to the problem areas in general aviation operation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in our hand and to save life. Let us, the journey begin from this moment on. Thank you, Program Director.
Let the journey begin. Let the journey begin. Absolutely. Thank you, Exec ASO, Mr. Simon Sehwabe. I must say I do appreciate the support on the salt and pepper look as well. But more so appreciate what you've mentioned, the broad collaborative process. It's a term that's used quite widely in this generation of 4IR. It's good to see such terminology being used in strategic processes as well, in regard to our industry more especially. And another positive thing which I want to commend you on is the very technical approach, which you seemingly and certainly have the knowledge on, mentioning the very specific aspects which are some of the causal factors in regard to aircraft accidents, and that's very positive. So we thank you, Mr. Sehwabe. We still have a number of speakers. So far, we do have Mr. Neil de Lange, who will be talking to us more in detail about this General Aviation Safety Strategy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Morning, DCA. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members of the industry. And a very warm welcome to especially all the guys that are here today that's making this happen, this webinar. It's fabulous that we can share in such a wonderful new way all the things that we have to say about safety. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump right into it and perhaps just give a very short introduction again as to how we got to the various outputs that we're going to discuss here. So we've had industry consultations, we've had internal consultations, and we had fabulous turn-ups at these meetings. I was very heartwarmed by all of the people that we have met, new faces that we've seen, and all the old guys that have contributed all their wisdom to all of this. And if I can summarize in 3 points, the outcomes of all of these deliberations is basically the following. 1, there must be a multifaceted, multidisciplinary and an integrated effort to safety. That means we all have to be in this together. Secondly, only an all-out, sustained and concerted effort supported with the necessary resources and buy-in from all of the stakeholders would make this work. And so that basically supports the first point. And then thirdly, stakeholders would cooperate on the basis that the CAA carries the flag, that the CAA sets the stage, that it coordinates the effort, and in that way we will make all of the progress that we need to make. So let's continue. So during the discussions that we've had, we've noticed a number of items being repeated over and over, and we started calling these the hotspots. So we've summarized the hotspots, and you may have heard earlier the reference to a number of these. So I'm just going to say these hotspots are the following. Pilots. You know, it's so easy to blame the pilot if something goes wrong, but perhaps it's true. Perhaps there is something that we need to do in relation to the pilots. So there's going to be a focus on the type of training that the pilots undergo. And that's one of the areas that we need to focus on. And the instructors. So obviously the pilots know what the pilots know because the instructors told them that. So don't we need to focus a little bit more on the instructors? So obviously these are the items that that we need to spend some time on. Implemented safety recommendations. So often the AIID does its work, it does the investigation, it writes its report, and at the end of the report it includes safety recommendations. But do we implement them? Do we really follow through that these are implemented and that they've actually reached fruition? Or does it end up in a drawer? We must make sure. We're sitting with a desensitized society, a society that doesn't really care for life. We hear on the radio so often about so many people got killed in a road accident, or so many got killed or got maimed or injured, and it's just more. We are just so over it. We've had so much of it, so we've become completely desensitized to safety. Is it not something that we need to address with the public at large? Another item, accident reduction techniques. Do we teach pilots how to recognize accidents and how to reduce the impact of threats external to the cockpit? I don't think so. We focus a lot on how to teach someone how to fly, but do we really teach them how to fly in its environment, recognizing all of those external factors? Our training seems to be very technically focused. We are focusing on a career pilot. We are not making aviators. We need to reconsider our approach to training, and not more hours in the cockpit, but a more holistic approach to the environment in which we are. We also don't necessarily apportion blame when we investigate accidents. Does that have an effect? Would it make a difference if there is accountability attached to accidents? Perhaps we should consider that, and perhaps that should go into the focus areas. Lack of mentorship and information sharing. We used to have hangar talk. You know, people used to get together. They would share over the bar counter, over a cup of coffee or a beer, all sorts of stories that would teach them more about their experiences. We don't find that anymore. We just don't have the time for that anymore. People come to the airfield, they open the hangar doors, they fly, they close the hangar doors, they go home. They don't spend that time hearing from the old guys that's been around, that has all the experience to share. Perhaps we should consider bringing an element of that in. RPAS, we've mentioned RPAS. we share the same airspace at low level with a number of these flying contraptions, and perhaps we need to look at how do we make sure that we stay out of each other's way? How do we address the threat of RPAS in the general aviation environment? We've had lots of reports of near misses, and obviously those are the things that we need to consider, and we have the expertise within the CAA dealing with RPAS that could very well manage such a focus group. And then lastly, we have to also look at DAMEs, the designated aviation medical examiners, as well as the pilots, and see what support we can lend to them to make sure that the best service is rendered. So we've created 11 focus groups, and we've packaged the outputs of the General Aviation Safety Strategy into those 11 focus groups. The first focus group will look at the General Aviation Accident Reduction Seminars to establish a GARS presenters team and to oversee this program. So what is this all about? We need to get those with the knowledge and with the message out to the people that fly, to the people that have already got their licenses, and to those people that are still undergoing training. We need to make presentations after well-researched material has been developed on an ongoing basis, and bring to the attention of all of these people how progress has been made insofar as these, the latest information is concerned. Then secondly, an occurrent trend monitoring forum. How will we know when we are effective? How will we know when we are successful at what it is that we are trying to do? Only when we can measure the trend of accidents going forward, measure the trend of safety, and that's possible. We establish a focus group that will sit and deal with all of the data, all of the information, and collate a trend. Thirdly, educational guidance material. We want to also look at a pilot in command under supervision program and a mentorship program. All of this will necessitate the development of educational guidance material that will assist the instructor also to have an approach to safety, bringing that into the curriculum. The fourth one, we're looking at establishing a dedicated publications team. Develop the CAA brand, public appeal, and a National Aviation Week. We see that we need to perhaps establish, together with a communications department that will run with a focus group like this, a concerted effort in coming up with ways in which we can communicate the safety message in the modern time using social media and other media to bring across the message. For that purpose, we will establish such a focus group, and obviously we will invite participation on this. Fifth focus group, continued support for safety campaigns. Of late, we had the Rusty Pilot Safety Campaign, we had the Safety First Aviator Campaign, and there's a number of safety initiatives driven by industry, and we would very much like to support those because they play an incredibly important role to get the safety message out into the field, having contact on a more social basis perhaps with the pilots and driving that message home. And so for that purpose, we would like to set up a focus group that will deal with that. Then we have the sixth focus group here, the implementation of a revised instrument rating syllabus. We've heard from the industry, we've heard internally that there seems to be a concurrence that the syllabus needs to be updated, and that will obviously necessitate a whole lot of discussion in the amendment of regulations or technical standards in order to bring the IR syllabus up to speed with the latest developments. The seventh focus group, framework for the devolution of powers. What does that mean? The CAA needs to increase its footprint. The CAA needs to have a good interaction with the formal structures in the aviation, and particularly in the general aviation, recreational aviation area. This is where we need to decide on a model on how we as a CAA need to move forward to have that increased footprint, and how the industry is going to play a part in being in that enlarged footprint. This will obviously mean the amendments to Part 149, which we've discussed many times, and we will then take those amendments and put them into action as soon as we know what it is that we're trying to achieve. safety. Our increased footprint needs to bring about a safety value proposition. And that is what that is going to be about. And we will obviously want to have your inputs and participation in that focus group. A research project, a number of items relating to the underlying factors, as we've mentioned a little bit earlier about the desensitized society, needs to be investigated. Here we're looking at what we call criminogenesis and etiologies. These are very technical academic studies on what make us do what we do when we do it. And we need to be mindful of all of these underlying psychological factors that have a bearing on how we perform in the cockpit under certain conditions. So obviously these research projects will be initiated, and we are very excited about that. There's a threat of RPAS, as we've mentioned, that needs to be investigated. And we will kickstart a focus group dealing with this. The 10th focus group will deal with development. So what is development? And why development? And why development and safety together? Well, we are of the view that you cannot really improve safety without improving the industry, without developing the industry. Here we have the National Development Plan. We have the not only the safety strategy, but the NCAP, the National Civil Aviation Policy, that will talk to the improvement of the industry and the development of the industry. Once we are successful at helping to develop the industry, we can develop safety. So safety is absolutely reliant on the development of the industry. And then the last one, focus group, the 11th focus group, will deal with matters medical. And these guys will look at the DAMEs, the support that the medical examiners need, as well as the support that pilots need, both from a medicine as well as a psychological aspect. And for that we have a wonderful participation from AVMET that will be involved in this, and we will encourage the participation from the industry in looking at ways in which we can lend even better support to the medical practitioners as well as the flyers out there. And with that said, I'm excited and I'm happy, and I'm looking forward to call for your nominations and to discuss that in a few moments' time. Thank you very much.
We're now joined by our panelists for a discussion on the gas process. And with us we have Mr. Claude LUTHAGA, Mr. Pierre Lopscher, Mr. Neil de Lange, Mr. Simon Sekwabe, Mr. Johan Lottering, and Mr. FREDY TONG. Gentlemen, I've got a couple of questions in trying to unpack this gas a little bit. And Mr. Sekwabe, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with yourself. And our first question is, what effect will the gas have on risk-based oversight and surveillance?
Subhash, thank you. I think what we need to look at first is general aviation is also subjected to oversight like any other operational activity in aviation. The CAA and globally, they are migrating from what we used to call compliance-based oversight. We have a lot of lessons that we've drawn from the previous program that we ran under the CAA, one of them being the cross-functional excellence action plan. So as we're drafting our model for safety risk-based oversight, we deemed that it was also important to consider the work that has been done under General Aviation Safety Strategy. So our intention is to take the lesson learned from the previous cross-functional excellence action plan together with the General Aviation Strategy to enhance our oversight in the general aviation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sekwabe. And Mr. de Lange, I'd love to come to you right now. There's a number of other industry safety campaigns. I'm quite sure CAA has a couple as well. Please tell us, how would the gas affect or integrate with, if at all applicable, with some of these other safety campaigns?
Thank you, Subhash. Yes, of course, there is in the industry the Safety First Aviator campaign. There's of late the Rusty Pilot initiative that was driven, and there's a number of other initiatives, and we foresee that going forward we support these initiatives. It's a wonderful opportunity to interact with the members on the ground, with the various flying communities on a one-on-one basis, and we foresee that we will continue that support, and for that purpose a focus group will be established to assist and to further enhance our relationship with these initiatives. Thank you.
That certainly sounds positive. Enhance the relationship, you mentioned, Mr. de Lange. Thank you. Mr. Tong, you have been quite prominently involved in a number of SSP and SMS activities nationally. And there is now this General Aviation Safety Strategy. Can you tell us, does this actually fit into any of the National Aviation Safety Plans or the Global Aviation Safety Plan?
Thank you very much, SUBASH. That's a very comprehensive question, and the understanding is very important. The imperativeness of the Global Safety Strategy is very important because it aligns or needs to align to the National Aviation Safety Plan. And in that regard, on the basis of the National Aviation Safety Plan, that's where the strategies are developed in the essence of managing the aviation safety within the state comprehensively, without any sector of the aviation industry left out or left behind. In that sense, we will have a comprehensive picture on the sense, or in the sense that how does our aviation looks like in a basis of performance rather than just compliance sake. Now, when it comes to this, it really aligns directly or fits directly to the National Aviation Safety Plan in that way. And so it does on the, I would say horizontally, fit to the state safety program, which is the set of objectives and regulations and activities that are aimed at managing and improving aviation safety.
Thank you, Mr. Tong. And Mr. Lopsha, I've got a question for yourself. So some would argue that aviation training is really the crux of ensuring aviation safety. And the question is, with all of these many safety initiatives as alluded by Mr. De Lange and the rest, why not just focus on training? Do you have an answer on that?
Thank you, Subash. Yes, it's a very important point. First of all, I would agree that training is the crux of safety. But I just want to make it clear that the General Aviation Safety Strategy is exactly what it says. It's not just another safety initiative or another safety seminar. It's a strategic plan. It's a long-term strategic plan whereby we are looking at a holistic approach to all the different facets of safety. So training will form a very critical part in the strategy and moving forward. You know, we will be looking at continuous professional development programs. We will be looking at things like train the trainer programs. So training in itself has numerous angles. But we cannot look at purely training. We need to look at the bigger picture. And as I've already said, we need to look at it holistically. So, and that's the essence of it. Being a strategy, we need to go beyond just one or two areas that will play a vital role. And I think in that way, that is exactly what GAS is aiming to achieve. GAS is aiming to achieve a more sustainable, longer duration impact on general aviation safety in totality.
Thank you, Mr. Lopsha. Mr. LUTHAGA, I'd love to ask you a question at this point. So we've noticed that with RPAS being a reasonably quite a new development in the aviation sector in South Africa, and with COVID, AVMED has become a lot more prominent as well. There's a number of additional research projects that's happening at the moment. Are these at all going to feature in the GAS in any way?
Yes, Subash. I'm sure you'll agree that RPAS is one of the fastest growing sectors in aviation at the moment. And with this rapid growth in aviation comes the added risk of increased accidents and incidents. So the GAS document aims to launch a focus group that will look at the threat of RPAS in aviation, specifically in general aviation. And on this focus group, we'll have the relevant industry RPAS experts. Further to that, with regards to AVMED, the GAS actually plays more of a supporting role for flight crew members and aviation professionals in general. We'll partner with medical professionals on a focus group in order to look and address all the medical and human factors elements of the GAS project. With regards to the research projects, that's actually something that I'm very passionate about because there's a dire need for research into exactly why accidents and incidents are occurring. Once again, we'll set up a focus group with the relevant experts to dive into questions such as what are the causal factors, how to establish trend monitoring, and how to mitigate those causal factors.
Thank you, Mr. LUTHAGA. And Mr. Lottering, you're quite passionate about safety. You're the author of 2 books in relation to aviation safety as well. And I'd love to ask you a question on the GARS, or what is also known as the General Aviation Accident Reduction Seminars. Please tell us, what is the purpose and desired outcome of these seminars?
The purpose, the straight answer is obviously to reduce accidents. So the General Aviation Accident Reduction Seminars will be the spearhead of the General Aviation Safety Strategy. So we have looked at accidents as they repeatedly occur as phenomena. And we said collectively, by using exponents from the industry, so let's go and look at the deeper underlying causes. Why are pilots overwhelmed? Why do they get ensnared? And then we discovered that accidents form a very definite pattern. They are taxonomically classifiable and identifiable, but they are nowhere to be found in standard curriculums. That is the surprise. So what we endeavor to achieve here is to get a so-called streetwise pilot, a more resilient pilot that is more aware and that is more able to recognize the precipitating circumstances and the underlying factors and the contributing factors as to not be ensnared by these. And in identifying the most vital aspects, we have applied our minds collectively. So this is a team effort. It's also a coordinated effort with the industry. We said if we have a couple of hours to spend with an attendee at a seminar, what will we talk about? So now we're talking about real scenarios that really occur, most fatal accidents. And we said, let's look at them in terms of criteria like how exposed are pilots, what are the consequences of these accidents, how regularly do they happen, how severe are they? And we said, let's look at a method of optimizing our time. And let's really talk to not only the mind of the student, let's talk, or the attendee, let's talk to his heart. Let's get him to accept these values and internalize it, make it part of his mental makeup and his personal resolve not to get into an accident and to look out for the accidents at a perception which counts, which matters. And in so doing, we would like to develop captaincy, which is a concept that's gotten lost, and airmanship. So let's put out a better product there for the sake of those who come after us and the sake of the young ones and their passengers. So we designed also a system whereby they would relate to the protagonists of safety, their peers, though they're more seasoned veteran presenters, and they can identify with them and we can get buy-in. So that is the purpose, is really to be sensible about avoiding accidents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lottering. It sounds like you certainly have your hands full with a number of these initiatives. And Mr. Sekwabe, I've got another question for you, and that is in relation to ICAO. So ICAO has defined numerous high-risk categories in relation to aircraft accidents. Perhaps you can tell us how would these be addressed as part of the GAS?
So I think I've once seen a quote which says, history has taught us that we fail to learn from history. As South African, we refuse to be part of that approach. The history that we've learned, and from the stats from ICAO and globally, that demonstrate what kind of accident are occurring. We've also realized the very same accident are also occurring in general aviation sector. The high risk occurrence that have been deemed by ICAO that requires attention will be mid-air collision, loss of flight, loss of control in flight, runway incursion and excursion, out of that, when we put the gas strategy, we said, since we realize these are part of our environment, we need to put concerted effort to ensure that we address those issues, especially since they are known to us, in order to make sure our aviation as safe as it can ever be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sekwabe. And Mr. De Lange, just following on from that, so ICAO does release a number of publications and they have numerous events. And I would like to ask you, for this gas, will there be any dedicated publications for industry? Will there also be something I've heard called a National Aviation Safety Week? And perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that.
Thanks, Subash. Yes, I think we've heard a lot being said about the intention of what it is that we're trying to achieve collectively. The next question would be, how do we get this message out? How do we liaise with the recipients of the message and our partners in industry? And to this end, we have to come up with a complete communication solution, if I can call it that, to include social media. Lots of people are now communicating on their cell phones and on the internet and on modern social media platforms. So obviously we need to have a presence there, and we need to use that to get the message across. We also have to look at the print media and how we're going to address getting the message out using more conventional means. How do we drive awareness of what it is that we do on a constant basis? As it was also pointed out, this is a long-term project. And also one of the initiatives that was raised in our consultation sessions dealt with perhaps the hosting of a National Aviation Week, or an event where we can have a multiple conferencing situation where we can interface with and get feedback from the industry on how to take this project forward and how to see if we've addressed all of the items that we are setting out to address. So the communication solution is really an all-out holistic approach to make sure that we continue our communication with the industry. Thank you.
Holistic approach, that sounds very positive. Thank you, Mr. De Lange. And Mr. Tong, given your background on SMS, and I take it that you probably are of the view that recreational aviation is not as much impacted by SMS efforts as perhaps some of the more regulated forms of industry, such as airliners, corporate aviation operators. And the question to you would be, are there any safety gains that would be applicable on recreational aviation activity in terms of gas?
Thank you very much for the question. The gains are a lot. We can't even start counting them, nor even ending to count them. In this sense, what is the objective of the SMS? To who does the SMS fit to? The SMS is a safety management system that is ideally adopted, implemented by the service provider, with a primary objective of what? Two components in the middle of them. Safety risk management, which is identifying the hazard, doing the risk analysis thereof, and coming up with the mitigations. So along that process, the process is a continual process whereby it needs to look at itself in terms of the continuous improvement. That's when it brings the safety assurance. Now, when it brings the safety assurance, it's whatever the mitigations that I have input as an operator, as a service provider, are they ideally serving the purpose? That's where it comes. Now, where does that feed? That feed to the what you call the state safety program. The state safety program is ideally there to work and guide the service provider, and then to get the data from the service provider and use that data explicitly, analyze it to identify where are the key risk factors on the basis of operational environment, on the basis of operational sector. So that's where it will go into, it will fit into the state safety program. So ideally, when we have that the picture of the state safety program, because it is a program, now we are ideally, vertically so, be able to feed to the NASP, which is a National Aviation Safety Plan. Now the plan will come into commensurate to the time period that is given on what is not to be doing, what interventions are there. Taking from what my colleague has said about the safety enhancement, that's which will be derived from the NASP. It is very important that now the gas is coming along to fit into the NASP. So those safety enhancement initiatives, they will ideally be there and be a part of the plan and the program, and then be installed where from through the service provider's perspective point of view. Then ideally so, we are able to manage safety comprehensively across the aviation entity. And then we ideally know to identify and tell with confidence that how is the outlook of our aviation safety performance through it, through the safety management system. Thank you very much.
Mr. Loubser, so we've heard a lot about safety initiatives, but we also know that development of any aviation industry is in the best interest of the state, and in this instance of South Africa. And the question to you is, can safety be improved while still developing the aviation industry?
Thank you so much. First of all, yes, we need to understand that these two things go hand in hand. It's very easy, in a sense, to achieve safety, but we might end up with a situation where we become so safe that we don't have aviation anymore. So it's critical that while we're developing safety, while we're instilling a culture of safety, that we continue to nurture and support the growth of aviation. I think the critical thing as well is that we need to understand whatever we're developing today is going to affect our industry and our safety in the future. So it's critical that this whole program also looks at future development. I'm talking about the youth that are going to become our aviators of the future. And if we instill that mindset, that culture of safety today, it'll definitely improve the results downstream. But at the same time, we need to support the industry in such a way that we're not just instilling the culture, that there is growth, there is continuity, there is sustainability. Because after all, one of our core functions as a state, as a CA, is to make sure that our industry continues to develop, continues to grow. And I think if we can achieve that growth, if we can achieve that sustainability with 1 foot in the growth and development portion and the other foot in this culture of safety, I think we'll have a far brighter, far more secure future of our aviation industry.
Latching onto that, Mr. LUTHAGA, just to some degree, it was mentioned earlier, there's this term, devolution of power. And what does this involve? And is this somehow related to Part 149, the Aviation Recreational Organizations?
Thank you, SUBASH. So for me, devolution of power has got 2 key elements. The first one is regulatory empowerment, and the second one is community responsibility. Let me start with regulatory empowerment. We cannot have a conversation about regulatory empowerment if we do not bring into the conversation regulatory development. So I mentioned before that we want to have a number of focus groups. One of these focus groups is going to look at devolution of power, and if need be, there will be regulatory development activities within this focus group. So the same applies for Part 149. The focus group will look at the 149 regulations, assess them, and if required, develop on those. So my second point is community responsibility. As aviation professionals, if we want to take part in any flying activity, we need to exercise a certain level of responsibility. With responsibility comes accountability to something or someone. And it's there you will find the key to successful devolution of power. The objective overall is basically to enlarge the footprint of the CAA through devolution of power.
Thank you, Mr. LUTHAGA. And Mr. Lottering, I've got a final question for yourself, and that is educational guidance material. It was mentioned much earlier on. Is this beneficial to reducing accidents in your view? A man of many years of experience in this area. And then the second part of this question is, how will the success of this strategy be measured?
Well, if we look at training, the components are skills, knowledge, attitude, and discipline. So we are now looking at those factors that aren't readily identifiable. So the educational guidance material bring everybody on the same page. And it ensures that we have a maximized approach so that we deal with the correct incidents and accidents in terms of severity, of terms of probability and in terms of exposure, to eliminate those factors in a coordinated fashion, so that everybody doesn't just go off on his own tangent. Now, the only aspect of it that's measurable will probably be attitudes. So when you measure something, it's either got to be done in a quantitative or a qualitative way. Quantity of accidents, we cannot influence those underlying drivers and the factors. We have got no control over it. But we can influence attitudes. And to measure that, we will have to draw up surveys, starting with questionnaires at the initial seminars, and then measure trends. We can ask our industry partners to participate in that, say the dedicated media and our own media, to print questionnaires and to measure how the attitudes towards safety change over the 5-year span of this entire program. And hopefully we will then see the impact through the reduced number of accidents. That is the best we can hope for. So we aim for the best and we hope for the best, and to measure it, that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but it's doable. I hope that answers your question.
It surely does. Thank you, Mr. Lottering. And that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. I'd just like to go perhaps around for the last time, starting with yourself, Mr. Tong. And you can give us any parting words from yourself on why is this beneficial to industry? Just in brief, please, and we can follow on with the rest of the panel.
Thank you again, once again, Subash, for the third time. It is beneficial for the industry, because in the sense that we need to understand what is happening in the industry. Remember, the CA would like to the industry to self-regulate, but being self-regulating yourself is not like in the sense of I do as I please at any time. It's on the basis that I comply, and by virtue of complying to the regulation, I can even measure the level of my compliance to that regulation, and I can even ascertain to what extent do I comply to that specific regulation, or either you over-comply to that specific regulation. It is very important that such initiative is taken, and it will take the industry to a point where it's balanced, whereby we are able to contribute to the global world, because aviation is the one that connects the world. Without aviation, ideally, we're not going to connect us with a better, fast speed of frequency that we would like to. Thank you very much for that.
Mr. Lottering?
Well, sir, if one life can be saved through this coordinated program, it will already be worth it. We can't put young heads on old shoulders, but we can surely mentor them. So I hope we're going to leave a legacy of safety. And that is my prayer for this entire program, and that it will outlive us and it will become a culture.
Mr. Sekwabe?
Just thank you. I'm going to lash on what Johan just said, to say to us every life matters, and safety is a journey. There's no destiny to say I've reached ultimately what I wanted. And I also want to appeal to the members of the industry to say, as much as we are the regulator, you are a safety partner to us. We cannot achieve what we're seeking to achieve without your involvement. You may be deemed to be an approval holder because you are carrying an approval, but ultimately this is a joint responsibility. We are the regulator, you are the regulated one, yet you are our safety partner. We therefore seek your participation in the program. Thank you.
Participation, excellent. Then Mr. DeLange, how about yourself?
Thanks, Subash. I think what excites me most about this program is the holistic nature of it. The fact that we are now, in a concerted way, addressing a variety of safety-related matters that we can address as one. And I think that
has been lacking for some time. There's been a lot of expertise put into and a lot of focus put into very specific objectives. Now we have a concerted effort, and I think that to me is the exciting part of the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. De Lange. And Mr. Loopsha, how about yourself?
Yes, thanks, SUBASH. Not to repeat what's already been said, but I also think that I'm very excited because this is not just, as I've already said, a safety seminar or just another safety program. It's a well-developed, well-considered, well-researched strategy. What I like about it is that, as already been alluded to, this is a partnership between the Civil Aviation Authority and industry. This is a holistic approach not only to safety, but to the overall promotion of safety, but at the same time looking at development. And you know, aviation plays an absolutely critical role in our country's economy, in various industries, and I think if we can nurture and support those industries and general aviation to grow those industries, to grow the economy, to grow empowerment and skills development, but with this whole program, as I've already said, with this culture of safety, I believe that we are really going to do a lot of good and a lot of prosperous results, positive results will come out of this whole program in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loopsha. And how about yourself, Mr. LUTHAGA?
Yes, SUBASH. So I agree with what all my panel members have actually said, but one element that I enjoy about the GASP is that it's a long-term strategy that will ensure continuous education, training, and safety awareness when it comes to safety in the country. And I think that long-term commitment will ensure that we have a solid investment and value add for the general aviation industry as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. LUTHAGA. Thank you to our panelists. And there you have it, some of our panel members double-clicking on the GAS project, giving us their thoughts, and I'm sure it has been quite beneficial to us. We will now take a very brief coffee break, and when we return, we'll be back with Q&As. We'll see you in a bit.